being as this is Erev Tu Bishvat, and it also happens to be Holocaust Memorial Day, I'd like to turn it over to Rabbi Baum for a few minutes to teach us a few words of Torah on the subject. Rabbi Baum.
Thank you. And thanks, Marty, and thanks everyone for being here this evening. A number of years ago, I visited a Shiva home, and it was mourning the loss of a young man who had passed. And I was sitting down, and one of the young person's friends I met, she asked me questions. And she said, Rabbi, what do you think happens after you die? Like a good rabbi, I answered a question with a question. I said, well, what do you think happens? And she said, no one has memories from before they were born. It's just dark in there, right? But eventually there's light and then you're born. So maybe the same thing happens. Maybe there's a light that leads us to another reality that we just can't fathom. And I said to her, I'm going to be honest with you. Our tradition has many different theories as to what happens in the afterlife. But to be honest, no one's come back to let us know. But I have to say, I may like your answer the best. I give this teaching because we're at that very interesting moment in the Torah. We're at parashah Beshalach, which we're reading this week, and we'll be reading on Shabbat. And the situation is we have been freed from Egypt, but Pharaoh says, no, not so fast. I want them back. I want all the slaves back. And he pursues us. And we get to the Red Sea, the Sea of Reeds. So we're stuck between a sea in front of us, and then behind us, we see this army, the most powerful army on the face of the earth at the time, led by what was a very humbled Pharaoh. And the question we have to ask ourselves is, was this the womb that they probably asked? Is this going to be our tomb or our womb? Is this going to be the end or the new beginning? And I thought about this with the experiences of Jewish history.
For the visual.
That we have these two states happening so much in Jewish history. And one of those moments is today. 76 years ago today, January 27th, 1945, the notorious concentration camp Auschwitz was liberated by the Soviet army. It's personal for me. My grandparents were actually there. I was recently presenting another synagogue, and one of the questions they asked me was, did your grandparents' survival play into why I became a rabbi? Now, before I give you that answer, I want to delve a little bit more into our Torah portion. And it's at the very beginning. And it said that the Torah says that God led the people round about by the way of the wilderness at the Sea of Reeds. Now the Israelites went up armed out of the land. It says, V'chamushim alu b'nei Yisrael meretz Mitzrayim. This word chamushim is where the rabbis said there's language we can play with here. Some say it means that they were armed. But other rabbis said that, and this was from the Talmud, Rabbi Nohari in the Talmud, says that chamushim indicates that only one Israelite in 500,000 made it out of Egypt alive. According to this midrash, only a fraction survived to embrace the wilderness journey to freedom, Torah and the Promised Land. So when people ask me if my grandparents' story is a reason why I'm a rabbi, the answer is yes, because very few of our relatives did survive. But we did. I did. And so part of my mission in life, my purpose, is to continue the legacy of the Jews who did not make it out alive. But it's not just me who has that sacred mission. It's each one of you. Like me, you are one of those chamushim. One of those chamushim who left Egypt was a woman named Serach bat Asher. Serach, the daughter of Asher. The Midrash tells her story that right after this line of the chamushim, the Torah said that Moses took the bones of Joseph with him, as was promised by his ancestors, the children of Israel. But the Midrash says that he couldn't find the bones. He could not find where Joseph was buried, and they had to leave. And that's where Serach bat Asher comes into the story. The last possible moment, she shows Moses where Pharaoh had hidden Joseph's casket, which was in the Nile. Serach bat Asher was the granddaughter of Jacob, Joseph's niece through his brother Asher. And you might wonder, how is she still alive? Well, there was a miraculous thing that happened. She was the only one alive from her generation. The Midrash goes on to say that she even lived to enter the promised land. The Midrash sees the Israelites and Moses preparing for this journey ahead. The body of the community is concerned with military preparations, while Moses's focus is on spiritual preparation. What's implied here is that a sacred community needs to recognize both the need for practical planning, which is part of what we're doing tonight, and for maintaining a commitment to a transcendent mission, something that's higher than us. And I know it seems obvious, but there's a lot that can be drawn from these sacred words. Something I see in this lesson is that quantity, raw numbers of people, are not how we judge a people's vitality. We've never been a large people, and yet look at the positive impact that Jews have made in the world. We could be here for a whole other day if I told you the story about how individual Jews have changed the world for the better. The Midrash tells a story of one woman whose dedication to our past allowed us to continue on into the future. And it talks about the shared purpose that each one of us has. Our sages use Serach to remind us that every person, every member of the community has the potential to impact the larger world in a much greater ways than they can think. The people who we might look over or ignore can be the ones who bring us to freedom. And that's why I love our community, Shaarei Kodesh. I often say this, other places count their members, but my goal as a rabbi and the goal of the leadership of our congregation is to make each one of you count. So we're standing here, if you look out the window, the sun is setting, and we're in this kind of Bein Harbayim moment. It's a moment where we're between 2 days. We're at International Holocaust Remembrance Day, and it's Erev Tu Bishvat, and we'll be doing a Seder in a little bit. I wanted to share some words of Torah from Rabbi Rick Jacobs, who wrote about Anne Frank's tree and the coincidence of these 2 days occurring so close to each other. I want to share the picture of it just so that you all can see it. He wrote, the tree pictured provides enormous daily inspiration. It provided enormous daily inspiration to Anne Frank. The white horse chestnut was over 170 years old. It was one of the oldest chestnut trees in Amsterdam. And when in 2005 it was found that the tree was suffering from a serious disease, the Anne Frank House decided, with the permission of the owner, to gather chestnuts, germinate them, and donate the saplings to schools named after Anne Frank and other organizations. Before the tree collapsed and died, 150 descendants of the tree were donated to the Amsterdam Bos Woodland Park. In 2013, after 3 years in quarantine, the last young trees from the Anne Frank House seedling project were planted in the USA, United States. And then he quoted the Talmud, "May all of the shoots taken from you be like you." Today, we look to the past and to the future. Tu Bishvat, and this is a little bit from our Seder that we're about to do, is like a bonsai tree. This is written by Nigel Savage. He said, Tu Bishvat today is like a bonsai tree that helps us to see in miniature the broader shape of contemporary Jewish renewal. It is one of the clearest examples of the rebirth of rooted Jewish life after the Shoah, the Holocaust. The charred site of a forest fire slowly gives birth to new growth, and 40 or 50 years later, a new forest stands in its place. Each of the elements of that forest grows literally from the seeds that survived the fire, and yet the forest itself has its own unique characteristics. From the depths of despair and loss, we've always created. So today I want to ask you to do one thing. I want us all to remember like Serach bat Asher did, because when we remember, we ensure that the future will be better than the past. So what I would like for you all to do is on a piece of paper, and I'll put this in the chat box, this picture. It says hashtag we remember. And what I want us all to do is to, if you can print it, if not, just get a piece of paper and write the words we remember and the hashtag. And I want you to hold it up on the screen. I'm putting the picture that I have here in the chat box, and you can download it in just a moment. If you would like to print it, you can, or we could maybe do it right before we'll do it right before the Seder, actually, so we can move on with the meeting. But I want us all to take a picture. We're going to put it on social media. I want to thank you all for being here this evening, and thank you for all that you do and all of the Torah that you are continuing, because it's because of you that our legacy will live on.
Yishar Koach, Rabbi, and again, thank you for your inspiration.